Hello and welcome to the WSET Bitesize seminar on 10 clues on how to choose a great European wine. Welcome to everybody. The Wine and Spirits Education Trust is the world's leading provider of qualifications and courses in wines, spirits, sake, and now beer. WSET has over 50 years experience in designing and delivering education to help both wine professionals and consumer enthusiasts learn about wine, spirits, sake, and beer. You can take WSET qualifications in over 70 countries through a network of over 800 course providers. If you're interested in finding out about embarking on the WSET journey, visit wsetglobal.com to find your nearest course provider. My name is Matt, and I'm very excited to be talking about 10 clues as to choosing a great European wine. Before we start, I'm in Sydney, Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people from the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land where I am today. I would also like to pay my respects to all elders, past, present, and to the children of today, who are the elders of tomorrow. I've been working for WSET as the APP Development Manager for Asia Pacific for the last 12 months. But prior to that, I've been teaching WSET courses for over 5 years with a number of different providers all throughout Sydney. I completed my diploma back in 2019 in wine and spirits, and I have been working in the wine industry for over 15 years as an Italian wine importer, wine educator, and working in hospitality as well. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 clues that can give you the step up on how to choose a great European wines. Sometimes European wines can be quite confusing because they don't name them after the varietals that they have, like we do in Australia or America, like Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. They'll name them after the place that they come from. But a little bit of research can really go a long way and help you make great decisions for European wines. And normally these things can be found on the labels of the wines, and it's just deciphering those clues to allow you the insight into making choices that get you a better quality wine. Now, those 10 clues, we're going to go through France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal today. And I hope you go from this seminar and then you can take it into a restaurant or into a fine wine retailer and use these clues to step up your game and choose a bottle that maybe you haven't tasted before and have the confidence to be able to do that. My first clue today is from France. And in France, they use the word village, villages, on their label. Now, yes, they do name them after a village, but this is when they have the word villages on the label. There's a few regions in France that do this, like Beaujolais, the Macon. The Macon is in the south of Burgundy, where they do fantastic Chardonnays, and the Côte de Rhône. Now, these are regions that will have a particular style of wine. They're a large region, so you can get some areas which may not be the best at growing grapes, and others which are the famous villages, which have the better soil, the better exposition, the better slope. And it's these villages that combine themselves together into a smaller area, and they're considered the more superior vineyard areas. It's a smaller, better soil, better area that they give you the clue by attaching the name villages on the side of it. So you might see Beaujolais villages or Macon villages or Côte de Rhône villages. Next time you're in a bottle show, in a wine store, have a look for these and maybe go for the one that has villages, because you can still find these wines at very good price points. That's my first clue. Another clue, which isn't as big on the labels, is Maison Bottiglia Domaine. Excuse my French. I know I've got an Aussie accent. I'm doing my best with it, and I can hear all of those French people laughing at the moment. Or you can be looking for the same Maison Bottiglia at Chateau. This means this wine has been bottled at the estate. But more than that, it means it's been made and matured. So it's gone from grapes into wine. It's aged in the cellar, maybe in some barrels or maybe in some concrete vats or maybe in some amphora if you're getting really into the new age of making wines. And it's been bottled by that producer in the same site. Now, this clue will tell you that the producer has had greater control over the entire process. Sometimes people will just buy juice or buy wine and then bottle it themselves under their own name. But if someone who's taken the care to take those grapes all the way into wine and then mature it and then put it into the packaging, the bottle that they want, kind of gives the clue that they care a little bit more, they have greater control about it, and that the wine itself possibly could be of better quality. They print it on the label, and sometimes they print it on the cork as well. This is my second clue to choosing a great European wine. We're staying in France for our third, and this is where Cru Bourgeois comes in. Now, this is a classification that talks about on the left bank, the Medoc of Bordeaux. On the Medoc are some of the world's most famous villages: Saint-Estèphe, Margaux, Saint-Julien. And in this, they had a classification in 1855 to rank these estates. This classification is still valid today, but those estates have changed. So they've brought in this Cru Bourgeois classification, whereby somewhere between 240 to 260 producers are within this classification that are just below that 1855 classification. It's reviewed every 5 years to make sure that the quality of the wines and the producers stay at a high level. And they've got 3 tiers of levels: the bottom level of Cru Bourgeois, then Cru Bourgeois Supérieur, and then Cru Bourgeois Exceptional. Every single one of these wines are of very high quality, but it isn't as well known as the 1855 classification. So here's a chance to explore a very good quality to excellent quality wine without having to spend the hundreds, sometimes thousands of euros to be able to purchase the wines of the Medoc. Cru Bourgeois, as you can see, is that symbol on the right-hand side of the screen. Sometimes it's on the label, but look for the words more importantly, and that will give you the clue as to finding a great European wine from the left bank, which oftentimes is predominant in Cabernet Sauvignon with some Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and some other red wines as well. We're moving out of France now, and we're moving into Italy. And my greatest clue for Italy is Classico. Classico is only in some of the regions, but they are some of the most famous regions in Italy. You see, in Italy, when a region became famous, they kept on expanding the land out where you could grow those grapes and make those wines and still call it that famous wine's name, like Chianti, Soave, Valpolicella. Once it got to the stage where it was almost diluting the wines, and there was a big difference between those from the original area and those from the newer areas, some of these classifications decided to do a Classico zone, the most historical central area where the wines became famous. Often it's the best land for growing the grapes, has the best soils, has the best slopes, has the best direction. Now we can look at these wines, and instead of buying a Chianti, we could possibly buy Chianti Classico, knowing that there are some tighter rules, tighter regulations, and better quality grapes being used to go into those wines. Soave, Soave Classico. There's a massive difference between these two. The soils of Soave Classico, those volcanic soils, give the Garganega grapes this beautiful texture to them. And I highly advise trying a Soave Classico next time you're at the wine store or at a restaurant, because it's those grapes that really made this wine famous. Other famous Classicos in Italy are Valpolicella, and this is a larger region as well. Some people think, oh, Valpolicella, that's not the greatest wine. Try one from the Classico area. That's your clue to find a better wine. Verdicchio di Castelladeiesi has a Classico, Orvieto has a Classico, and even one down in Calabria, Ciro, which used the Gaglioppo grape. If you're exploring through Italian wines, check out Classico. Now we move into Germany. Now, Germany I'm talking about is the VDP, the Verband Deutscher Prädikatsweingüter. Now, this is an association of producers who have classified their vineyards together, and as a group, by consensus, have said, we have the great vineyards of Germany. Now, not everyone's in this classification, and not all of the best sites are in this classification. But the ones that put VDP on the label and have that symbol on the top left-hand corner, which is that black eagle with the 6 grapes in the center, they're very proud to be a part of the VDP system. There's strict grape growing and winemaking regulations, and it depends on the region that they come from as to which grapes and which regulations they can use. Now, within the VDP system, they actually classify their wines in a pyramid system as well. Their lowest level, which is still good quality from a good producer, is a Gutswein. VDP Gutswein. This is oftentimes the winery's calling card. So they want to make sure they're not going to make their winery name not be known for good quality. So even though it might be the lowest tier, it still has excellent quality wines. But I think the key to VDP, without spending lots of money, is the Ostwein. Now, they come from a single vineyard, and sometimes these vineyards are the top-level Erstlag and Grosslag vineyards. This is the producer saying, I am showing you what this village can do and how good the wines from it can be. Once we get into Erstlag and Grosslag, that's when we are single vineyards that are classified. Heading into Spain, and clue 6 and 7 were Crianza and Reserva. And these are the requirements of the winery to how long they should mature their wines for in the cellar. Now, I think these are the two most exciting areas for Spanish wine at the moment, because they allow the producer freedom to do the best things with their grapes to be able to craft the best wines. Now, you see your Crianza, you have 6 months in barrel, but oftentimes they'll go longer because they have to remain in their cellar. It can be in the barrel or in the bottle for a minimum of 24 months. Now, you don't want too much oak in your wine, so this 6 months might work, maybe a little bit more because you've got some structure, maybe 12 months. So oftentimes they won't leave it in there for the full 24. They'll take some of that time to age it in bottle. So these wines are really ready to drink and got a little bit of structure and interest in them as well. Then you've got Reserva. Now, Reserva, they have to age for 12 months, but they have to, in barrel that is, but they have to keep it in the cellar for 36 months. Now, oftentimes these wines are ready to be enjoyed when you buy them. And they're not as expensive as Grand Reserva. They sometimes can be a little bit too long in barrel and being aged for too long. Whereas Reserva and Crianza, they are those kind of gems in the middle. Yovan's a little bit too young. Grand Reserva, very serious, but a clue to finding a good Spanish wine is going for Crianza or Reserva. Now, if you've got some money to spend, a little known category known as Pago. Now, this is the highest category in Spanish wine law, and it was only created 20 years ago. We've got IGP, DO, DOCA, Calificada, which is just a couple of regions, Rioja and Priorat. But then you've got Pago, which is a few estates, special estates that are all of their production is slowly within that one geographic area. All of the grapes, all of the winemaking, all of the maturing, all of the bottling, and their wine will show quality and characteristics that are essentially or exclusively due to where they're from, together with some human intervention like winemaking, and then also cultural factors like what grapes have they been growing there for a very long time. Now, there's not a lot of Pago wines. So this clue really is, if you see one, maybe look for something that's going to be a little bit more exclusive, a little bit more expensive, but these are the best of the best estates within Spain. Clue number 9, we go to Brut, and we're going to sparkling wines this time. Now, Brut, as many people do know, means dry. And when there's less sugar in the wine, there's less ability for the winemaker to hide a lower quality wine. You see, Brut wine is anything up to 12 grams of residual sugar per litre. So there's still a little bit of sweetness in there, but once you go up to the sweeter level, which can be confusing at extra dry, now we're talking between 12 and 17 grams of residual sugar. So you've got quite a bit of sweetness in there. It doesn't seem as sweet because that bitter carbon dioxide bubble will balance out that sweetness. If it's Brut, and oftentimes we do have lower residual sugar levels than 12 grams, maybe it's 6 grams or 8 grams, you need a little bit, but not a lot. Now, in Prosecco, I certainly know that the best quality wines come at Brut level. The extra dry seem to hide themselves a little bit behind that sugar, whereas the Brut can show you very good quality fruit that has created this wine. So my tip or clue for sparkling wine is look for Brut rather than extra dry, especially when we're talking Prosecco. My final clue for choosing a great European wine, and we head to Portugal, and we can't forget fortified wines. My clue here is in port. It is LBV, which means late bottle vintage port. Now, these will state a vintage on them, but unlike other vintage ports, you're not going to have to wait 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 years for the port to be at its best, like a vintage can be. A late bottle vintage port, they age it in the cellar for some time, somewhere between about 4 and 6 years in the cask before they bottle it. So these grapes that they use to make port can be quite tannic, a lot of tannin in them that needs time in a barrel or in some type of maturing vessel to be able to soften those tannins. And they'll do that for you in a late bottled vintage port. Vintage ports are often bottled between 1 and 2 years, and they're asking you to do the aging in your cellar for the extended period. Whereas the LBV ports are going to be more approachable at a younger age and can be found at better price points than, say, a vintage port. They also filter them for you, so you're not going to have a buildup of sediment if you don't like your sediment, or you don't have a decanter near you to be able to make that wine a little bit clearer. So that is my 10 clues for choosing great European wine. There's going to be a feedback that's going to pop up survey, which I'd ask you to fill in. Don't worry about the technical issues. We will be replaying this, edited without the technical issues, on our YouTube channel, on the WSET Events Hub on YouTube, and we will email the link to you once we've edited it as well. If you want to know where to study WSET, you can find out more about our qualifications and all of the locations where where the courses are offered through our over 800 course providers by using the Where to Study tool on the drop-down menu of wsetglobal.com. And we've got some upcoming seminars. There's one for alumni, so people who have studied with the diploma, shifting gears, taking it from wine tasting to beer tasting with our Master Cicerone Mirella. And for all, we have the rum bite size coming up on April 30th, which everyone can enjoy, delving into the wonderful world of spirits. I'd like to thank you for your time, and hopefully you've been able to get some interest and get 10 clues to choosing a great European wine. Before we go, does anyone have any questions at all? Let me have a look and see if we've got some questions here. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the questions prior to my dropout, so I wonder if there are some questions. Here, I did have a question from someone who emailed it in, asking about the storage of wine in restaurants, and if we will be able to have the restaurant somehow state that they've been stored in some type of temperature control. I think that's a great idea, but unfortunately, there's no regulations that need to do this. So at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you to ask the restaurant if there is some great temperature control that is happening for their wines on site. A question here, how does Cru Bourgeois stand against the old classification from the 1800s? Can a wine be labeled both Cru Bourgeois and have the old classification as well? No, they wouldn't do that. The Cru Bourgeois is a newer classification for those winery estates that aren't within the old 1855 classification. That classification hasn't changed a lot. There's been some movement up and down, but there's been a lot of new estates that are able to grow fantastic grapes since 150 years ago. So the Cru Bourgeois classification is able to give that distinction to a larger number of really good producers within the Medoc. Another question, I recently tasted Weingut Schloss Vollrad Riesling 2019. It's the first on the sweeter side. It was my first Riesling. It was intentionally made sweet. How is it made sweet? Did they add sugar? No, they didn't add any sugar. But what they would have done is they would have stopped the fermentation prior to all of the sugars being fermented into alcohol. So I believe that wine, if it had a little bit of what we call residual sugar, so that is the sugar that has been left after the fermentation, then you can have the lower alcohol, probably at around about 9%, 10%, maybe 11%. So they want to have that residual sugar in there to balance that very high acidity that very high acidity that you can find in cool climate, Riesling especially. So it is a winemaking tip. And one last question. I'm going to be starting my WSET level 2 in a few weeks. Excellent. I'm very excited for you. What do you think is the best strategy to memorize a large amount of complex information on wine production regions and areas, as well as grape varieties and flavors? Do some work before the course starts. I highly recommend delving into that textbook, having a good read of it all the way through so you have a basic understanding. Go into each of your classes with an open mind and use the wine tasting to solidify the information. A lot of students find that they will do theory, memory, and then do the tasting. But the two should work together, because it's as your brain is taking in that information in terms of the theory, and then you have a wine that will, oh, it does have that flavor, or that does have that acidity. Oh, the acidity level is because of that climate. It will allow you to, one, enjoy the course a little better, but also making sure that you solidify that information through that wine tasting as well. Don't see them as separate is my biggest tip. Use them together to be able to make the information easier to understand. Last question, I'll throw it in here. LBV port, can I know from which vintage? Absolutely, they always state a vintage on there. That's the whole key to it. They are telling you what vintage it is from, and that'll be on the front of the label. All right, I'm going to sign off now, and I thank you again for coming into this this bite-sized webinar, and I will see you out there, hopefully in a WSET course soon. Thank you.